Ask yourself this. If you had to, would you rather be dropped into the middle of a vast forest many miles away from any civilization, with the forest predators being more common, or be dropped into the middle of Point Nemo, which, just in case you didn't know what it was, it's the furthest point in the ocean from any landmass on Earth. We're closer to space than on land. I think most of us would probably pick the forest for many good reasons. Because as you get plopped into this thalassophobia-inducing ocean, well, it starts to kick in. Our minds race. You think to yourself, what could live in here? Why is it so deep? What can eat me? I can't maneuver in here. If something wants me, I don't stand a chance. And yes, you're completely right. And you will never know until you actually swim down into the depths of the abyss. As you descend, life becomes more and more awful. Things that just looking at gives you an extraordinary fear of the space you're in, enhancing your fear even more. Now, throughout history, this fear wasn't felt by humans, because they didn't exist. But let's just be lucky we didn't. The sharks throughout history probably felt thalassophobia more than we do today. Because the oceans of the past are infinitely worse than today's. You've probably heard of the most famous ones, the Western Interior Seaway, the Australian Ocean possibly, but there's a body of water that not much attention is drawn to. Albeit it's not exactly well defined, but it's a region of the Earth people don't really talk about during a specific time period. With life so alien and so dangerous at the same time, it's arguably one of the worst. This is the Antarctic Ocean of the Late Cretaceous period. Antarctica's ocean today is rather tame. It is mainly surrounded by penguins, leopard seals, Weddell seals, blue whales, and orcas. Back then, if you went on an expedition here, you would be safer on land than in the water, as the land wasn't a solid chunk of ice like it is today, as it was mostly ice-free, and significantly warmer, may I add. Lush polar forests, and a few dinosaurs popped up here and there, but not very many, like the Antarctipelta and Taniwhasaurus being the most prominent ones. But in the ocean, it was warmer and more shallow. Like most oceans, as soon as you travel out, well, things will start to take an interest in you if you get too close. And yes, this ocean was home to the Titanic mosasaur. Well, it's a little more complicated than that. We found a 68 million-year-old egg that we believe belonged to a mosasaur. Now, we didn't know for sure, but we eventually linked it to a skeleton that was found a ways away that belonged to a massive mosasaurus. This wasn't any mosasaurus, this was a different one. Different enough to give it its own name and genus. Alright, I'm gonna try to pronounce this here. The Taniwhasaurus. When the fossil was found in Seymour Island, Antarctica, the team who found it uncovered a skull that was already over a meter long. Then, in the harsh conditions that miners were working in, they uncovered the whole body. And the body was 10 meters long, which is pretty huge for this area at the time, making it one of the largest predators known in the southern region. Now, the reason why we made it its own genus is because of one main detail that we studied on the mosasaur. It had a well-marked heterodont dentition. Now you're probably thinking, what the heck does that mean? Well, it basically means different teeth. The mouth of this predator wasn't made for one specific thing. For example, T-Rex had teeth and a jaw made for crushing bones. But the teeth on this one varied, meaning it's probably a generalist hunter, meaning that it probably fed on anything it could find, many different marine animals and possibly even other mosasaurs, meaning that they probably wouldn't be very nice to be around as they were always hungry. Nothing would be safe in these waters, even around another mosasaur. This beast would have fed on other alien-like creatures that lived here as well, like the plesiosaurs. But I promise this ocean's a little weirder, and I was right. These were no ordinary plesiosaurs. The ones here aren't the ones that rip flesh off bones and crush things in the ocean. Well, these ones are the most alien and the least scariest way possible. They were the filter feeder versions of the plesiosaurs. Like modern-day baleen whales, which are filter feeders, developing more whale-like teeth for this lifestyle, sporting long necks and robust bodies. These were mosasaurus' abundant meal, most likely. Now, there was a few different species found around, and one of the smaller ones, Mortinaria, which was an elasmosaurid actually, the ones with the very long necks and the small heads, a juvenile specimen being 3 to 4 meters, and an estimated max size of 8 meters, which is still massive, but not the biggest one found here. That just hints on what's coming next. Now, Antarctica is home to the biggest elasmosaurid ever recorded, which are still classified under Plesiosauria, but are defined by their extremely long necks and small heads, shorter tails, and paddle-like limbs, with very streamlined bodies. The elasmosaur found in Antarctica was no baby. This one was 12 meters long and weighed a whopping 15 tons, which for reference is about 10 female great white sharks. And as scary as it is, it's not carnivorous, but still something that would 100% kick in your thalassophobia regardless of its diet. Now, this was all at the Late Cretaceous period. To be exact, the Maastrichtian stage. But if we back up a bit from there to the Campanian stage, now there was something else that lived here that would have given mosasaurus a real matchup, and that would be the Taniwhasaurus. This was in another group called the Tylosaurinae, a subfamily to mosasaurids. Now this thing would have been an absolute menace. Now the reason why I say this is because the Tylosaurs have a reputation within paleontology of being, well, a meanie, as it was one of the absolute top predators of the Late Cretaceous, and one of the biggest creatures to ever live in Manitoba, which is pretty cool. Now, this particular mosasaur was different. This thing was no joke. It had a lack of teeth in the front of its jaw, suggesting that it could possibly ram into its prey. Not too certain on what that means, but it's probably nothing too good, as this thing probably weighs several tons like the Tylosaurus. Now, this doesn't mean that it had no teeth. The front of its snout had a lack of them, but the rest of the jaw were filled with the razor point circular teeth. And this also leads to another point, that it had a complex neurovascular system, meaning it probably had an interesting way of detecting prey. There's not much known as to what it preyed on, but the place was abundant with ammonites at the time, so large mosasaurids and the Taniwhasaurus could crush the hard shell with its powerful jaws and get the soft bodies inside. And there were also sharks, of course. There had to be some sort of background danger, although these sharks probably felt the most thalassophobia out of everything that lived there. If a mosasaur carcass sunk, they would absolutely swarm it. If they tried to attack one while starving, well, that means they're pretty hungry. Hungry enough to conceal themselves a death wish. Because no, a pack of sharks is not beating a mosasaurus. These ecosystems existed shortly before the ultimate demise of the dinosaurs, a time in which temperatures and sea levels experienced significant changes. Although the main reason why they all disappeared at the end of the Late Cretaceous is because, well, did you forget? Well, the giant piece of space rock that smashed into Mexico. And it changed the dynamic of life everywhere. But still, even 66 million years later, our thalassophobia is still strong. And thinking back on what used to roam these waters, maybe even make it worse, but although it'll always be really magnificent to think about what lived here before us, as they could never be replaced. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more like this. Until next time, thanks for watching.